Jack was dumbfounded when he came across this strange-looking object during his routine patrol around camp. He couldn't guess what it was, but it looked like something that wasn't normal or could be of value. He decided to pick it up and take it to his corporal, but just as he arrived back at camp, the object's sphere suddenly glistened and made a rustling sound. When Jack's corporal saw the object, he immediately screamed, "Why did you bring this to camp? What on earth did Jack find in the desert?" Jack was forced to put the item in one of the empty bomb-proof ammo cases that were lying around the tent and then leave the tent immediately. The corporal followed suit and then distanced himself to make a couple of calls. He should have been preparing for his next expedition, but he had no idea if he was still allowed. He waited nervously for the corporal to finish his calls, and when the man came back to the tent, he almost seemed angry that Jack was still there. He shouted at him to get on with his task and forget about the object. As Jack walked away, he saw two other high-ranking soldiers join the corporal, and together they went into his tent. He needed to learn more about the object and find out what it truly was before he could move on with his normal duties in the desert. Jack decided to go by the corporal's tent again that evening, but when he arrived, the tent was closed and abandoned, which was strange as the corporal was always present around these hours of the evening. What was going on? Jack waited for about half an hour, and the camp was getting quieter by the minute as other soldiers went to their own tents to prepare for bed. Seemingly nobody was around here anymore, and still no sign of the corporal. Jack knew that he should just go back to his own tent as well and try again tomorrow, but a little voice in his head was telling him otherwise. His curiosity was getting the upper hand in his head. He wanted to learn more about his find so badly that he started considering some very dangerous things to get to the truth. He looked around to see if there was really nobody in the area who could see him and then sneakily got into the tent by crawling under one of the tarps. But this was not the case. The tent was empty, and Jack's attention immediately fell on the ammo box. The corporal had closed the box and locked it up when Jack left the tent, but now it was opened up. To Jack's horror, it was also empty. Jack started to frantically look around the tent, but there was no sign of the item anywhere. They must have already moved it to a more secret or secure location. Jack left the tent feeling fairly defeated. He went back to his tent to get some rest before the next long day, but then suddenly noticed that a squad of officers was going around all the tents. What were they doing? Jack started to get a bit afraid that they were maybe looking for him, but when he was face to face with the officer leading the squad, it was quickly made clear that this was not the case. Jack was even more taken aback by what they were really doing. The officer told Jack that they were looking for Corporal Jackson and two high-ranking officers. Jack was almost stunned into silence. Corporal Jackson was the man to whom he had given the item, and the two high-ranking officers who were now also missing were the people whom he had seen enter the corporal's tent when he was leaving. How had they all just disappeared? After a bit of back and forth in his head, he told the officers that he had no idea where they could be, and that he was pretty sure that he had not seen them that day. But that is when the expression of the officer changed, and he told Jack that a couple of other soldiers had seen him at the corporal's tent that early afternoon. Why was he lying about this encounter? "I didn't think it was relevant," he stammered, struggling to justify his lie about not seeing the corporal. The officer's eyes narrowed, unconvinced. Without another word, Jack was swiftly escorted to a tent reserved for questioning. But when the officer stepped out, Jack's eyes scanned the tent, quickly formulating a risky escape plan. Jack's escape was fraught with peril. In the camp's fringe, Jack overheard a discussion about an unplanned vehicle departure. His interest piqued. This could be his lead. He had to follow this new lead, stepping into the uncertain path ahead, driven to uncover the larger truth that beckoned him. Lurking near the camp exit, Jack overheard guards discussing the mysterious vehicle's departure. The guards mentioned a hastily packed vehicle, its departure raising suspicions. Jack's ears tuned to every detail, piecing together the puzzle. Aware that time was slipping away, Jack hurried towards the city. Reaching the city's outskirts, Jack eyed the sprawling military airport. He treaded carefully, aware of the need for stealth and subtlety. The airport could hold the key to locating the corporal and the strange object. At the airport, Jack blended in with the crowd, his senses heightened. He observed personnel movements and eavesdropped on conversations, gathering fragments of information. The bustling airport was a maze of activity, but Jack's focus was unwavering. In the midst of ignored calls, one unexpected caller flashed on Jack's screen: his mother. His heart sank as he answered. Her voice, laced with worry and confusion, relayed the news that the military had contacted her, accusing Jack of desertion. The gravity of his actions and their consequences hit him hard. Listening to his mother's trembling voice, Jack's resolve was pierced by her fear and concern. She spoke of the officer's stern warnings and the potential repercussions that awaited him. Getting off the call, Jack's voice was steady but laden with regret. He recounted everything: the strange object in the desert, his encounter with the corporal, and his subsequent actions. The officer listened intently, the gravity of Jack's story dawning upon him. Jack needed full closure, one that he hoped would aid in resolving the unfolding mystery. Reacting swiftly to Jack's confession, the military initiated an immediate lockdown of the airport. No planes were to depart until further notice. The order rippled across the facility, creating a stir of activity as personnel scrambled to enforce the directive. As the military mobilized, Jack joined the operation. Together, they raced towards the town, every second crucial in a high-stakes operation. Thoughts of the mysterious object and the missing corporal dominated his mind. The stakes had escalated beyond his initial comprehension, and now he was at the heart of a pivotal operation. Clutching leads and piecing together clues, Jack traced a path through the city. He followed every possible trail, from eyewitness accounts to security camera footage. The chase tightened as Jack pinpointed potential hideouts for the corporal. He mapped out areas, cross-referencing them with known habits and patterns of the officers. At the airport, amidst the swarm of passengers, Jack spotted the corporal and the officers. His heart raced as he observed them from a distance, preparing his approach. Amid the airport's hustle, Jack zeroed in on the corporal, who clutched a briefcase tightly. With adrenaline surging, Jack made his move. He darted forward, snatching the briefcase with swift precision. The corporal's shocked expression was the last thing Jack saw before he turned. The briefcase, now securely in his grasp, burst out of the airport. Jack found himself in the dense city streets. The chase continued unabated, with his pursuers close behind. Jack's agility and quick thinking kept him one step ahead of his relentless pursuers. Finally, Jack ducked into a secluded alley, momentarily losing his tail. He leaned against the cold wall, catching his breath, the briefcase still firmly in his grasp. It seemed to pulse with secrets. This brief respite gave Jack a moment to gather his thoughts and plan his next move. Jack's attention turned to the briefcase in his hands. Its exterior was nondescript, but it was the secrets it held that intrigued him. Meanwhile, the military, acting on the information from Jack's earlier confession, began their search operation in the city. Their presence was marked by a static, methodical approach. The military's efforts culminated in the successful apprehension of Corporal Jackson and his accomplices. In a coordinated maneuver, the suspects were cornered and detained without incident. With the news of the corporal's detention, Jack realized the time had come to step out of the shadows. He approached the military checkpoint, his decision to come forward driven by a desire to aid in resolving the mystery and to clear his conscience. Standing before the military officers, Jack extended the briefcase, its contents still a mystery to him. The officers accepted it cautiously, their expressions a mix of curiosity and seriousness. The moment of revelation arrived as the military officers opened the briefcase. Jack and the surrounding personnel watched intently as the lid was lifted, revealing the contents. Despite the briefcase being opened, the true nature of the item inside remained elusive to Jack. He glimpsed the contents, but their significance was unclear. Surrounded by a cloud of questions and theories, Jack stood there, realizing that the journey to understanding the full story behind the object and the corporal's intentions was far from over. In the interrogation room, Corporal Jackson's demeanor shifted as he began to reveal the truth. Corporal Jackson's confession was startling. He admitted to orchestrating a scheme to sell the artifact for personal gain. The revelation was a stark admission of greed over duty, a clear betrayal of his military oath. Jackson's plan, driven by profit, had led to the chaotic events that engulfed Jack and the military. The extent of Corporal Jackson's betrayal unfolded as he described his intentions. With Jackson's confession, the military pieced together the entirety of his illicit scheme. The details of the plot, from the discovery of the artifact to the planned sale, became clear. Back at the military base, Jack faced the consequences of his actions. He stood before his superiors, their faces stern and unreadable. His words were met with silence, the gravity of his breach of protocol hanging in the air. Jack braced himself, knowing that his fate was in their hands. The day of judgment arrived. Jack stood solemnly before the tribunal, his future hanging in the balance. The officers presiding over the hearing reviewed the facts, their expressions giving nothing away. Jack's heart raced as he awaited their decision. This moment was the culmination of all that had transpired, a decisive point that would determine his career and his life moving forward. The tribunal's decision was finally announced. Jack listened intently as his fate was revealed. The verdict acknowledged his breach of protocol but also considered the extraordinary circumstances and his ultimate cooperation. The outcome was a mix of relief and responsibility, marking both an end and a beginning. As Jack walked out of the room, he knew that his journey had irrevocably changed him, both as a soldier and as a man.